Welcome to this week's episode of CEO Conversations. Today I'd like to welcome Dr. Saeed Salehi. Dr. Salehi is an associate professor at the Mewbourne Professorship in Petroleum Engineering at the University of Oklahoma. Dr. Salehi has an extensive background in geological engineering. He previously worked as drilling and well engineer in the oil and gas industry and has more than 10 years academic experience teaching and delivering university and industry customized courses. Dr. Salehi, thank you for joining our show today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Look forward to that.
Dr. Salehi, we would love to learn how you got into the oil and gas industry and how that's transformed to becoming an expert in the geothermal industry.
I think the a major motivation for me getting to oil and gas was through my dad that working in the petrochemical industry and sort of being raised up in a family that's in the, sort of oil industry. You get exposed to hear that, you get exposed to their friends and you sort of, get into that. And also being originally from a country that has more than 90% revenue from oil, you could see that there are a lot of people around you, working in the industry and talking about it. So you get a lot of motivation, and also you see, how the energy industry is, changing people's life, giving energy to them, giving heating their homes, cooling their homes. So you sort of think that you're going to do something positive for the people, and it's push you to of course go and study in that area. And getting into geothermal, I think there is a lot of similarities between the oil and gas and geothermal industry in terms of same sort of issues, similar skill sets. So, for instance, in the oil and gas industry, we are drilling pretty hot type of formation rocks, high pressure environments, risky environments, and then you see similarities in the geothermal, with the difference that geothermal is more of a clean renewable. So absolutely, it's a huge incentive for somebody, in the oil and gas industry to sort of bridge the gap of skills, from fossil fuels to geothermal. So that's how I transitioned, sort of, somebody working in conventional oil and gas, and then I saw a lot of these innovative solutions, or let's say tools, equipment that we have, we can apply them in the geothermal, and I started doing it, trying to use that knowledge.
So, can you share with me your thoughts on the geothermal industry as a whole, and what gets you excited when you think of geothermal's potential in a world that needs access to clean and independent energy sources?
I mean, I was always excited about the heat, about the natural thermal energy of the earth that can be used for many applications, from direct use applications to electricity. But I think what's fascinating for me about geothermal is that it's available anywhere on the earth. So you don't need to import geothermal energy. You can drill drill a well and use the geothermal in Oklahoma. You can do it in California. You can do it in Denmark. You can do it in Saudi Arabia. You can do it in Russia. So it's just fascinating to see that you don't depend on anything else. It's just everywhere. So it can be a local energy for you. It can be a 24/7 24/7 hours, 7 days a week, and it's a reliable base load. It's just a huge energy underground that you need to tap it. I mean, there was studies done, a couple of years ago that 2% of thermal energy from the earth is enough for the energy of the US for 2,000 years. Was one of the reports I remember, if I recall it correctly. So that's fascinating. I mean, if you see that there is a resource available to you locally everywhere, and it's such a huge resource, then it's fascinating to know about it, and it's fascinating to be able to help in the process of extraction of this energy.
I appreciate that. It is interesting in the geothermal industry, when I speak to people, they often think of geothermal energy in regards to heating their pool or heating their homes. There seems to be a misconception, or at least a misunderstanding, of what the true potential and power and impact geothermal energy can have and provide to the world. Talk to me about the current state of geothermal drilling. Why has no one been able to tap this power yet? And what is the state of current technology in geothermal drilling?
Well, one misconception about geothermal is that everybody thinks of electricity when it comes to geothermal. But geothermal is so diverse. If you think of geothermal applications, you can go from very shallow 10 feet to more than 10 kilometers. And then all of them, you can extract energy. So if you go look at for instance, the heat pump technology, it's pretty mature. It's more than 100 years of the time that we have developed the first heat pumps, and we've been using it. People are using it for heating up their houses, different places in the world, different places in the US. It's very efficient. It's growing, and it's geothermal, and people are been using it. If you look at the hydrothermal resources from geothermal places like Hawaii or Philippines or Indonesia or many other places around the globe, we've been dealing with geothermals, and we've been having a commercial electricity production from it. So it's been there, but one of the reasons people maybe don't pay too much attention because it's too small. So compared to fossil fuels, compared to solar and wind, the share of geothermal is very small. So according to I think some official numbers, it's about 2%, and 2% is really very small, and we have to scale it up. And one of the ways we scale this up is just look at places like the super hot rock, geothermal, so places, or let's say wells with the depths and temperature of more than 400 C, and this type of energy, they can produce a huge amount of electricity. I read some reports that you can produce super hot rock. A well can produce up to 50 megawatts, compared to maybe a smaller number if you drill a well at a lower temperature. So I would say it's been there. It's not that we are the first one looking into this. As a matter of fact, the super hot rock research goes to maybe early 70s, but it's not just being, let's say, consistent, continuous, and scaled. So that's one of the reasons people don't have much information about it.
You mentioned super hot rock. How deep do you have to drill on average to hit super hot rock?
I mean, it depends on, I would say honestly, depends on the location. So some places, maybe like Iceland, you can tap that high temperature at shallower depths, but maybe places in Oklahoma, you have to go much deeper to get that temperature. So I would say, on average, between 3 to 10 kilometers, you could reach, temperatures of beyond 200 C. So some places, maybe you need to go deeper to reach to that 400 C. Some places, maybe, you go shallower. So it sort of depends on your location.
And once you hit super hot rock, the potential heat and energy capacity could be as much as 50 megawatts. Is that correct?
Yeah, I remember from one of the reports I was reading, if you have a well drilled into super hot rock that has a temperature of 400 C, and if you have a roughly 60 kilogram per second, the potential for the super hot rock is 50 megawatts,
Wow.
from that hypothetical scenario.
What is the footprint required to produce 50 megawatts? I mean, with traditional power plants or other sources of energy, 50 megawatts could require a massive footprint of buildings and equipment to support that. Theoretically, how much space do you think would be required to produce 50 megawatts of geothermal power?
I can't recall exact, footprint for a footprint of a power plant, but I can give you an example that, compared to let's say a solar field, a wind farm that's going to generate 50 megawatts. The footprint of a 50 megawatt geothermal, it's going to be much, much lower, compared to the solar and the wind in that aspect. I can't, unfortunately, I don't have much, let's say, expertise and information on the power plant side, but I would, definitely say that it's going to be much smaller than, other renewable energy.
You mentioned wind and solar. I read in a study that two 9-inch holes drilled 5 miles deep could produce as much power as 320 acres of solar fields. That's a massive topical footprint on the earth to generate that kind of power. 320 acres of solar panels has a large environmental impact. How does geothermal compare as an energy source to wind and solar?
So I mean, there are a lot of innovations is also happening in the wind and solar. So as we talk about this, things may change in the future. But overall, I think one of the major advantages of geothermal compared to wind and solar is number one, geothermal is a reliable base load. So what I mean by reliable, it doesn't, the weather impact's not going to change anything in geothermal. So basically, you're going to see a minimal impact of weather. If it's a sunny day, if it's not a sunny day, if it's a windy day or not, you have always that clean base load. So it's like nuclear. It's like maybe natural gas. I mean, compared to wind and solar, you don't have it every time. So the energy storage with the wind and solar is a big issue. Basically, during night, for instance, if you are not able to store that energy efficiently, you don't have much of a solar, during the night. I would say number two is, as we discussed earlier, is the amount of space that it gets. So you need to, and you can see the pictures from the current commercial project. It's just a huge footprint of land you need for solar and wind, and people are starting to complain about the noise, the amount of space they get. The other thing is also the recycling. A lot of these materials that use for wind and solar, so solar panels, for instance, or windmills, are to recycle. And the other issue is the supply chain problem. A lot of materials that are used in the wind and solar are based on the rare earth elements, the critical elements that currently the US cannot produce, those materials at huge scale. So we depend on a lot of adversaries in the foreign countries for importing those. So in long term, I think having more on solar and wind is also will depend on that supply crunch. But if you just come back to geothermal, what you really need is probably injection well, production well, a power plant, and then you have all the skilled workforce and equipment manufactured in the US, or at least I can say most of it. Because if you look at the oil and gas industry, they have been doing this for more than 100 years. We have manufacturing plants in major oil cities, in major oil states, and they can be easily let's say be used for the geothermal equipment manufacturing. We have capacity to go and produce a lot of those materials in high pressure and high temperature. We can rehire people, we can use that work skill. So basically, I think for countries like us in the US, it makes sense to invest more in geothermal because we have a lot of domestic support, from supply to workforce, from pipeline, from expertise. So that fascinates me.
Yeah, that's fascinating. One of the things we're passionate about at Deep Power is providing a source of clean energy to communities around the world who do not currently have reliable or affordable energy sources, or where those sources are controlled by governments or dictators who control oil and gas sources. By providing clean energy to local communities, we really can change the world economics and can transform lives. We know that one of the challenges of drilling 3 to 10 kilometers deep into the earth is that there's a lot of earth on top of that. As you get deeper, the rock gets harder and has more pressure, and that is usually why oil and gas companies stop drilling. So talk to me about current technologies that are trying to solve this problem and why no one has found a solution yet. Without giving any of your intellectual property away, what has to happen to drill that deep and tap that hot rock or super hot rock?
Sure. I would start with with the oil and gas industry, that I would say we currently have most of the technologies, or let's say the capacity, to be able to go to that deep hot part of the earth. One of the reasons the oil and gas industry stopped doing it was that they didn't see a need for it. So for instance, if you're looking for oil and gas resources, in most of the cases, you don't need to really go to that type of temperature. So that was a stopper to not having, let's say, the tools, the equipment, the technology for that amount of super hot, rock technology or super hot rock drilling. We also have developed a lot of niche technologies in the high pressure, high temperature drilling. There are a lot of them happening, in the U.S., Gulf of Mexico. So there are a lot of fascinating technology exists that we can, be a little bit retrofit. We can use them for the, super hot rock. But again, it needs more investment. So if somebody comes, or let's say investors comes, with pile of cash to invest in this type of technologies, I think the the energy industry, the oil and gas industry has the capacity to develop those, to go after, the super hot rock drilling. But there are a couple of, important barriers, that I like to mention, and some of these barriers are related to the rate of drilling. So we, if you want to be commercially, let's say, successful, we have to drill faster, and in order to drill faster, we have to be able to, have some new technologies, some new beats, new type of fluids, new methods for drilling. So all of our thinking in drilling goes back to the conventional way that oil and gas is drilling. But somebody needs to think out of box that maybe that type of drilling is good enough for oil and gas applications. If you want to go after super hot rock, maybe we need to change things. We need to change the way we are drilling. We need to change the tools we are drilling. So innovation definitely can happen. And needs to be happen to make it commercialized. But I would say we need to invest on bits. We need to invest on new type of tools, equipment, sensing technologies, sensors. We need to invest on logging, for the high temperatures. We need to invest on type of fluids that we are using. For instance, the drilling fluids needs to be innovated. Fracturing, stimulation techniques needs to be revamped, type of materials we are using, propans, pumping. But most importantly, I think we have to think out of box. If we may be able to drill a test well to upgrade a lot of these things, but if you want to scale up one test well to 50 test wells, let's say to 50 wells, you need to come up with technologies that can be scaled up easily. So can be very efficient, can be, increase the rate of penetration by several folds, can increase the, for instance, the way we sense the things, the way we get the information from the wells, in several folds. Also, the other thing is the cost. We cannot afford to spend, 10 folds of the cost of, a typical deep oil well. We need to reduce the cost, and to be able to reduce the cost, a lot of these technologies needs to be mature. So we need to invest on those technologies. There are currently some technologies exist that we can, with a little bit retrofit and innovation, we can apply them for super hot rock drilling. So bottom line, honestly, is investment. So I think if the investment comes, there is enough enthusiasm, there's enough motivation. There are a lot of researchers, there are a lot of companies that really like to get into geothermal, but they need to have investment. As early technologies, you need to have much more investment to get into the commercialization point. So let us look at for instance, the solar and wind industry. So a decade ago, they were like geothermal. Now geothermal needs that investment to scale up, and I'm sure we're going to go there. It's just going to be the matter of time. Is it going to be how short of a transition or how long of a transition? But we're going to be there.
Thank you for that insight. It's exciting. Deep Power recently announced a sponsored research agreement with the University of Oklahoma, where you are the sponsoring professor leading that research. We are very excited to be able to sponsor that research as a company. And as you mentioned, that kind of research takes investment, and that is something that we are passionate about, and we are optimistic that you will be able to take you and your team's background and experience and develop a new drilling technology that will allow us to drill through that super hard rock. We hope as patents are filed that we can share more information about this technology. We are excited to be able to provide updates to the industry. Last question, with this technology you're researching, if it works, you have the potential to change the world. That's pretty exciting. Does that type of opportunity drive you and give you motivation to try and figure this out?
Oh, absolutely. I think when you're thinking that right now that we are speaking, there are people around the globe that don't have energy to heat their waters. Their kids are starving from not having a hot meal. People die because of the energy, being poor in the energy. Let's call it that way. It gives you motivation. If you are able to get this super hot rock energy to market a day sooner, you can you can save a lot of lives. You can make people life better, and I think that's a strong motivation. It's just makes you feel personal about some of these projects, and you put your passion behind it. You put all of your energy. It's not just about finishing a project, have a couple of more papers or patents, or let's say get an award or certificate. It's just something impactful that you are going to do for the people of the world, not only here but the world. I mean, imagine you take the geothermal to places that they are importing 100% of the energy from outside. They are under pressure. They are under, let's say, political environment that they have to pay a lot of incentives to have energy, and then you just give them a new type of energy that's affordable, and they can use it, or they can have it domestically. So it's just amazing. I think the feeling is so different than what we have done in the past, and I'm very excited to be involved in this type of projects, and to put some of my personal passion behind this.
We appreciate that. That was one thing that was very important to us when we were trying to find a university and a professor to work with, was that the sponsoring professor has some passion behind the project that was personal, and that it wasn't just another paper to publish. But I think with your background and where you grew up, you have a very different vantage point and perspective and experience that can make you and your team the key differentiator in making this project come to pass. So I thank you for sharing your passion, your experience, and taking time today to help us better understand geothermal industry, its opportunities and the potential, and also why you're doing research on this project.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate working with you and the Deep Power company. I think the company is having a very unique vision, investing in high risk, high reward type of technologies, things that's going to change the life of the people. And I haven't seen this type of, let's say, vision in every investor. And I think that's something we have to appreciate, and to mention that, it's the vision that matters the most.
We look forward to receiving updates from you along the way as you and your team make progress. Thanks for joining me today.